I think I'd been in and recorded like you do, go and record a few demos trying to get somebody's attention. I'd had a couple of other producers trying to help me. And
Alan Jackson never set out to be a superstar. He was never the type to chase spotlights, orchestrate scandals, or reinvent himself every few years to stay relevant. Instead, he was a quiet Georgia boy who let the music speak louder than anything else. That choice, ironically, made him one of the most beloved and trusted voices in American music. His songs weren't just catchy tunes. They were reflections of ordinary lives, faith, and moments too powerful to forget. For decades, his name became synonymous with honesty, tradition, and heart. But now, at 66 years old, Alan Jackson is once again in the headlines. And this time, it isn't about another Hall of Fame induction or a sold-out tour. It isn't even about a new album, though fans always beg for more. The news that has shaken the country music community is deeply personal, tied to health struggles that threaten the very stage that defined his life. Nashville fans and fellow artists alike are holding their breath, wondering what comes next for the man who gave us Chattahoochee, Remember When, and Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning. This isn't just a story about illness. It's about legacy, resilience, and what it means when a man who has always stood tall admits that even legends can stumble. To understand why this latest chapter feels so heavy, we must first step back and retrace the extraordinary journey that carried Alan from a tiny tool shed in Georgia to the biggest stages in the world. His rise wasn't just unlikely, it was a reminder that authenticity, hard work, and faith could still build legends. Alan Eugene Jackson was born on October 17, 1958, in the small town of Noonan, Georgia. His family lived in a simple home that had literally been built around his grandfather's old tool shed. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy. His father, Joseph, worked in a mechanic's garage, while his mother, Ruth, held the family together with her unshakable devotion. Money was scarce, but faith and love were abundant. From an early age, Alan was quiet, introspective, and far more comfortable observing the world than demanding its attention. He discovered music in the pews of a Baptist church, where hymns filled his young heart with a reverence that would later echo in his own songs. At home, the records of Hank Williams, Gene Watson, and Merle Haggard spun on the family's small player, planting the seeds of a dream Alan himself didn't yet fully understand. At 12, he picked up a guitar and began teaching himself to play. By his teenage years, he was scribbling lyrics into notebooks, though most of those early songs never left his bedroom. Like many small-town boys, he graduated high school and took ordinary jobs, working construction, selling cars, even repairing shoes. But unlike most, Alan carried with him a voice that could stop time. The most important constant in his life was Denise, his high school sweetheart. She believed in him with a conviction he didn't always have for himself. When she later became a flight attendant, she crossed paths with country icon Glenn Campbell and boldly handed him Alan's demo tape. That bold moment cracked open a door in Nashville that might have otherwise stayed shut. Alan's childhood was not filled with wealth or privilege, but it gave him something even more valuable: authenticity. His upbringing grounded him in humility, faith, and resilience. These qualities would later make him stand out in an industry filled with polished images and fleeting trends. By the early 1980s, Alan and Denise had made their way to Nashville, a city that chewed up hopefuls and spat them out daily. The odds were merciless. Record executives weren't impressed by just another Southern singer with a guitar. But Alan had something different. He refused to chase whatever was trendy. Instead, he leaned harder into tradition, embracing fiddles, steel guitars, and storytelling rooted in everyday life. Those early years were grueling. Alan took odd jobs to support himself, from courier work to construction, while continuing to write and play wherever he could. Unlike many others, he wasn't trying to be flashy. He was simply telling stories the way Hank Williams once did, straight from the heart, without filters. In 1989, his perseverance paid off when he signed with Arista Records as their very first country artist. The next year, his debut album, Here in the Real World, was released. The title track hit the charts hard, signaling to Nashville that this wasn't just another newcomer. Alan Jackson was here to restore the soul of country music at a time when it was drifting dangerously close to pop. The success of Here in the Real World was only the beginning. His voice carried the ache of old country legends, but came with a freshness that felt new. Listeners immediately sensed that Alan was not putting on a performance. He was sharing his life, their lives, and the truths that bound them together. Suddenly, the boy from a Georgia tool shed was standing alongside giants like George Strait and Randy Travis. With his tall frame, soft-spoken nature, and cowboy hat pulled low, Alan Jackson didn't look like someone trying to be famous. He looked like someone who had always belonged. That authenticity became his secret weapon, and as the 1990s unfolded, it would propel him from Nashville newcomer to one of the most important voices in country music history. Alan Jackson's rise through the 1990s wasn't just about climbing the charts. It was about embedding himself into the lives of everyday Americans. His songs became mile markers on the road of life, from summer flings to national tragedies. In 1993, Chattahoochee burst onto the airwaves like a shot of summertime adrenaline. With its playful celebration of riverbank youth, cheap thrills, and innocent romance, it became an anthem of freedom and fun. It wasn't just a hit single, it was a soundtrack to hot afternoons, pickup trucks, and growing up Southern. Even today, generations who weren't alive in 1993 know the song, proof of its timelessness. But Alan's artistry went far beyond lighthearted fun. In 2003, he released Remember When, a song that quickly became one of the most treasured ballads in country music. With haunting simplicity, it traced the journey of love from youthful spark to the golden years. Couples played it at weddings and anniversaries, while others clung to it at funerals and farewells. Its universal message of memory, love, and loss turned it into more than music. It was life itself, put into melody. Then came September 11th, 2001. As the nation reeled from shock and grief, Alan Jackson quietly penned "Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning?" Without anger, blame, or politics, it captured the raw humanity of the moment: faith, sorrow, confusion, and unity. When he performed it at the CMA Awards, the entire room was in tears, and millions of Americans found solace in his words. Alan wasn't just singing a song, he was giving voice to a nation's broken heart. Alongside these iconic hits, tracks like Drive for Daddy Gene, a tribute to his late father, reminded listeners that Alan's gift was deeply personal storytelling. Whether playful, tender, or solemn, his music had one thing in common: honesty. He was never trying to chase fame. He was holding up a mirror to the lives of his audience. By the end of the 1990s and into the 2000s, Alan Jackson was no longer simply a star. He had become a cornerstone of American culture, a voice people trusted to sing about the best and worst of life. Behind the cowboy hat, awards, and platinum albums was a man grounded in three unshakable pillars: family, faith, and the Southern values instilled in him as a boy. Alan's love story with Denise, his high school sweetheart, was one of the most enduring romances in Nashville. They married young, long before success was certain. Denise believed in him when he doubted himself, and her faith in his talent helped push him toward Nashville. But their marriage wasn't without struggles. By the late 1990s, fame and personal mistakes caused a rift, and the couple briefly separated. For a man whose career rested on authenticity, this was a devastating chapter. Yet instead of ending, their marriage became a testimony of forgiveness and renewal. Alan openly admitted his faults, learned humility, and fought for reconciliation. Denise, in turn, stood by him, their bond stronger than before. Together, they raised three daughters, Maddie, Allie, and Danny, whom Alan tried to keep away from the spotlight. He often said his proudest role wasn't Entertainer of the Year, but simply Dad. Watching his girls grow into women was the greatest reward of his life, and many of his songs reflect the tenderness of fatherhood. Faith was another guiding force. Alan never preached from the stage, but gospel influence flowed through songs like I Love to Tell the Story and his gospel project, Precious Memories. These hymns, inspired by his childhood church days, revealed the quiet, steady faith that anchored him through the chaos of fame. And through it all, Alan remained tied to his Southern roots. He preferred fishing trips to Hollywood galas, family dinners to red carpets, and small-town simplicity to lavish excess. The boy from Georgia never disappeared beneath the celebrity. He carried his hometown values with him, no matter how bright the spotlight grew. For all the joy and authenticity Alan Jackson brought to his fans, his journey was not without battles, many of which were hidden behind the curtain of fame. In 2021, Alan revealed publicly that he had been quietly living with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, CMT, a degenerative nerve condition that affects balance, mobility, and strength. He admitted that for years, he had masked the symptoms: occasional stumbles on stage, difficulty standing for long sets, and fatigue that even the roar of the crowd couldn't lift. But as the disease progressed, hiding it became impossible. Standing before cameras, Alan confessed with quiet honesty that CMT had no cure and that it would alter his life forever. Fans who had seen him as a towering, unshakable figure suddenly realized their hero was fighting a very human battle. But health wasn't the only struggle. Throughout his career, Alan fought against the commercial pressures of Nashville. As country music veered toward pop crossovers, executives pushed him to modernize his sound. Alan refused. He defended the steel guitar, the fiddle, and the lyrical honesty that defined traditional country. This refusal sometimes cost him opportunities, but it cemented his reputation as a guardian of the genre's roots. There were also personal storms. His marriage with Denise faced strain under the weight of fame, mistakes, and public scrutiny. Alan never pretended to be perfect. In interviews and songs, he admitted to his flaws, his regrets, and his efforts to rebuild what he had nearly lost. These confessions only deepened fans' respect, proving that even giants stumble. Financially and emotionally, the demands of stardom also left scars. Constant touring, recording, and managing a career of that magnitude carried a weight few outsiders understood. Yet Alan carried it with resilience, rarely letting the public see the exhaustion behind the stage lights. These struggles, health, industry battles, personal failures, shaped the man fans know today. They deepened his music, etched authenticity into his lyrics, and reminded the world that Alan Jackson wasn't a myth, he was human. And now, as his health struggles take center stage in headlines, fans see once more that their hero has walked through fire and still stood tall, guitar in hand, ready to sing. When Alan Jackson stepped forward with his most recent revelation, it wasn't just another update. It was a moment that left the country music world stunned and silent. After years of performing through pain and quietly managing his illness, Alan admitted that Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease had progressed more than he hoped. For a man whose career had been built on standing tall on stage with a guitar slung across his chest, the reality was devastating. Even walking across a stage was becoming harder. In interviews, Alan spoke with his trademark honesty. He didn't soften the blow with vague language. He explained that touring was no longer sustainable, that his body could not keep up with the demands of performing night after night, and that he would have to slow down significantly. It was, in his own words, one of the hardest decisions of his life. Fans who had grown up with him, who had danced to Chattahoochee at weddings, played Remember When at anniversaries, and leaned on Where Were You during national tragedy, now faced the painful truth that their beloved singer might not be able to share the stage with them much longer. And yet, Alan refused to let the revelation feel like a farewell. He made it clear he wasn't done creating. He promised to keep writing, recording, and releasing songs as long as he physically could. He wanted to leave behind not just memories, but a treasury of music that would carry his voice into the future. "I've always tried to be honest with my fans," he said, "and I want them to know the truth, but I also want them to know that I'm not quitting. I'm going to give everything I have left to this music." The announcement broke millions of hearts, but it also inspired them. Fans saw a man who refused to let illness define his legacy. They saw courage, humility, and gratitude. Alan Jackson's revelation wasn't just about the decline of a career. It was about the power of honesty, the strength of resilience, and the truth that even as his body falters, his music will remain eternal. Alan Jackson's story has always been more than just music. It is the story of a boy from a Georgia tool shed who carried hymns and honky-tonk songs in his heart, a husband who weathered storms to rebuild his marriage, a father who found his greatest pride in his daughters, and a singer who became America's voice in moments of joy and tragedy. The latest headlines about his health are heartbreaking. They remind us that even legends cannot outrun time, but they also highlight what made Alan Jackson different from so many others: his refusal to hide, his choice to be vulnerable, and his unwavering gratitude for the fans who walked with him every step of the way. Alan may perform fewer shows, and the spotlight may dim on the stage he has commanded for decades, but his music will never fade. Chattahoochee will still blast from car radios on summer afternoons. Remember When will still bring tears to anniversaries and funerals. Where Were You will still echo in classrooms when history remembers 9/11. His voice is not just preserved on records, it is preserved in the hearts of millions. As the world of country music holds its breath, one thing is certain: Alan Jackson's legacy isn't ending. It is still being written, every time someone sings along to his words. The headlines may speak of illness and struggle, but the story behind them is one of courage, authenticity, and a man who never stopped being real. Alan Jackson will always be more than a star. He will always be the voice of truth in country music.